So if you remember right, a couple of weeks ago, we started, or had a sermon on priorities. And I want to kind of just continue that along just a little bit right now. That you guys would, again, help us to focus a little better. Now, when you see this, I'm sure the first thing that comes to your mind, or at least when I saw this little clip, was the wide road and the narrow road. First thing that came to my mind when I saw this. This sermon is not on the wide road and the narrow road. I'm just going to warn you now. But this sermon is based on what I hope you will see something a little different. Something that maybe we haven't talked about before. But we are following that theme of priorities. My question for you today is, 2 weeks ago, I challenged you to look at your priorities. Where are your priorities? What do you give your time to? And that is your first priority, your second priority, your third priority. If you find that you don't have time for God, He's not your priority. He's not maybe even a sub-priority. And what I want to encourage you today is to change your priorities to make God first. God says, I am a jealous God, and I want to be your number one. And when we put something else in the position of where God needs to be, we have made Him our number 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 100. And then we wonder, well, I tried to make this decision based on what I thought God would have you do, yet you didn't ask Him. You didn't pray to Him. You didn't meditate on His Word. You didn't give Him the time of day. So therefore, when you made a decision and you go, well, that was a crappy decision. God really steered me wrong on that one. If you're not asking God, then don't blame Him. Because I guarantee your decisions, it was awesome. And I almost copied the thing. It's a little thing I saw on Facebook. A gentleman is with, I believe, his daughter. And he tells her to hold the bucket straight out. And it's one of those little plastic pails. And he says, this is your life. This plastic pail is your life. Now you have a table here, that's God. And then he had a bunch of water bottles. And he said, these are problems and decisions that will come up in your life. She said, okay. So she's holding the bucket out. She's feeling pretty good about it. She's, 15, 16 years old. She looked like a stick, like even thinner than me. So you know that she was not going to be able to hold even the empty pail too long. He grabbed about 4 water bottles, 16-ounce water bottles, put them in the bucket, and she went, and he goes, those are problems. Now, would you like those problems to go to God, or would you like to keep them? And she goes, I got this. Okay. He walked over to the table, and he got about 6 more water bottles. And he said, God or you? And she goes, I got this. He dropped them in the bucket. She almost dropped the whole bucket, almost fell over. Well, now she's got it set up all like this. She's got it in, she's got it tucked in, and she's kind of holding both hands, trying to hold it up. And he walked over and he got 4 or 5 more water bottles, and he goes, now I'm going to ask you again, and I hope you start to think about what you're doing, but you or God? And she goes, I think we might ought to give those to God. So he sent him over on the God table, and he goes, well, what about all these other ones? By this time, her little arms are shaking. She's got nothing left. And he goes, now all these problems that you think you got, how well you got them? And she goes, I think we need to start giving some of these to God. He goes, you need to give them all to God. And they start pulling out water bottles, and as they're pulling out water bottles, guess what? Their arm went back up and went straight. And he said, when you're looking at this, he goes, things you're giving to God are people that make you mad, people that frustrate you, problems that come up in your life. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're not loving the way you need to, and you need to give it to God. When we give it all to God, that bucket, our life becomes empty, and it's easy to manage. But when we're the 15, 16-year-old kid attitude going, I got this, and our bucket gets so full that we can't move, then guess what? We become burdened and wore down and frustrated and tired. And then what's our first instinct to do like a 15-year-old kid? Let's be honest, sorry, 15-year-old kids in the room. We blame others. Well, it's God's fault. It was so-and-so's fault. He said this to me. Well, guess what? You're going to have a lot of people say a lot of dumb things and bad things to you in your life. But you can either wear it as a burden or you can give it to God. And He says, bring your burdens to me. Lay them at the foot of my cross, that I will carry them for you. If you have your Bibles, turn with me. We're going to be in John today. And it's a story I'm sure you guys have all heard. but I hope that you will see it in a little different light. We've got a lot to cover. So we're going to be in John 21 today. After these things, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and he manifested himself in this way. Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus, twin, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of the disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. Now, I want you to see right there, I was reading in a commentary because I never really understood this. Again, I'm working on learning my Greek the way I used to know it 30-some-odd years ago. But that phrase, I'm going fishing, is actually, the tense is the reflection of I'm done. At this point, think about it. They've only seen Jesus a couple times after the ascension, after he arose, and he's getting ready to ascend into heaven, and they don't know what to do. They're feeling lost. There are fish out of water, if you will, and they don't know what to do. Peter says, I'm done. I'm going fishing. Now, this was not like you know what, guys? Hey, let's go spend the day fishing. Let's go to the bank and get some rappellas, and we'll just cast, get some bass, and it'll be a nice day. How about we do a campfire? Maybe we'll camp out for the night, guys. Come on, let's just go have some fun. This is what I've known for my entire life. I was a fisherman. I know nothing else, and the one who was teaching me is now gone. I got nothing. I'm retiring from this whole Christ thing. I'm going fishing. I'm done. I've got nothing left. I don't know what to do. So he looks at the rest of them, and he says to them, and they said to him, we will also come with you. And they went out and got in the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Now, I don't know about you guys. I have been fishing many times in my life. I love to fish. We used to go on fishing trips to the fire department up to Minnesota every year. I love to fish when you're catching. I hate sitting in a boat for 8 or 10 or 12 hours in a day, drowning worms, drowning leeches, drowning anything that I can find in the boat, and not catching anything. Because then you add in, it's overcast, so it gets chilly in the water, or the water's cold, or it starts to rain, or if you've ever been in a boat with a graphite fishing pole when it's lightning, bad idea, because it goes like this if you're too close to the lightning. I don't encourage you to do that. Fishing can be wonderful, but they fish all night long. They're not just casting out, little baits and stuff. They've got massive nets. And I don't know about you guys. One of my favorite shows used to be Deadliest Catch. I think that is amazing. Those guys up in Alaska, the waves, and they're trying to do crab fishing and all this stuff. Like, there's a part of it that I would love to do for about 2 hours. Other than that, I'm pretty sure I'd be heaving over the side of the boat and it would get ugly. But it looked very cool. But, those guys, same thing. They're out all night long, and they've got power machinery that helps lift the baskets of crabs. And then they'll lift it, and it's always that anticipation of when they bring it up to the side of the boat and it goes over to the rack thing. Is there lots of crab in it? Or is there no crab? Have they wasted their time, wasted their money, wasted their effort? Here, again, we see the apostles, the disciples, are in a boat. They're fishing, and they have nothing. All night long, they've been up, pulling in the nets, checking, throwing the nets back up, back and forth, and they've caught nothing. But then the day broke, and Jesus stood on the beach. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, children, do you not have any fish, do you? They answered him, no. Now I want you to see this also. This was Jesus playing with them. First off, Jesus knew they didn't have any fish. Have you ever been fishing? And yes, I'm going back to Minnesota here. We used to go out, we'd get up 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and literally we fished till 9 o'clock at night. Some days we'd come back, we'd have all sorts of walleye and perch, maybe a couple of pike, maybe one of the guys got a big old muskie or something. Or you came back with absolutely nothing. And you're smelly, you're tired, you pull in, and it's that guy standing up, and no offense, I'm not saying this derogatorily, but it's the old guy on the pier. He goes, so, did you catch anything? No! You know when you pull in, you caught something, you're all like, yeah, look at what we got to clean all these fish. And when you come pulling in and you got nothing, you're like, fishing, selling all my fishing stuff, I'm never coming here again. Picture the apostles or the disciples here at this point. They're pulling in. Hey, you guys catch anything? No. We did not catch anything. And this was from across the sea. So where we get to, it's going to be about 100 yards away. Okay. So he said to them, Jesus said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find a catch. Again, as soon as I don't know how many times I've pulled in on a fishing trip, pulled in on the dock, you guys, well, you should have used chartreuse colored jig heads. That's what's really working. I've got a box of jig heads that has every color known to mankind in it. It weighs about 900 pounds, and I have the 8-ounce, quarter-ounce, 16-ounce, 3/4 ounce. I've got them all. I've got every color. Well, it's chartreuse with a white dot. The one I don't have. Jesus says, cast it on the other side. I don't know, if it was me in the boat, I'd be like, I don't know who that guy is, but he needs to shut up and go away. Literally, we have been casting on both sides of this boat all night long. We have gotten nothing. But sure enough, so they cast, and they were not able to haul in because of the great number of fish. Therefore, the disciple whom Jesus loved, John, said to Peter, it is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put his outer garment on, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, about 100 yards, dragging the net full of fish. So when they got out of the boat, they saw that charcoal fire was already ready, the fish were placed on it, and the bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish in which you have caught. Now, I want you to see some things here. Did you ever notice that sometimes God asks us questions? And it's a rhetorical question. It's not a question that he doesn't know the answer to. We have examples in the Bible. Genesis 3:9, he says to Adam, where are you? Are we led to believe that God didn't know where Adam was in the garden? Like Adam was that good at hide and seek that he could hide from the God who created the Garden of Eden? No, he knew where he was. But he needed Adam to understand that God knows him intimately. We see that he asked Sarah, is there anything too hard for the Lord in Genesis 18:4 when Sarah is told that she is going to have a child in her older age? She was questioning, is this possible? It can't be. I'm old. There's no way I can have a child at this age. God says, is anything too hard for the Lord? He asked Ezekiel, son of man, can these bones live? I love the story about the dry bones. I really do. They get up, they form tendons and ligaments, and they turn into the army of God again. I love that story because it reminds me of the church. I think many times we are a church of dry bones. Now, I don't mean that we're all dead in this room, but sometimes we act like it because we have the comment, I'm good. We got the bucket. I'm good. Bring it. I can hold this. Until our burdens become so heavy that we can't bear them any longer. And then we realize God is saying, hey, Bill, where are you? You walked away from me. I didn't walk away from you. Bill, where are you? And they need to remember that God is looking for me, seeking to be with me. So my question today is, how can you see where God is? How can you know where God is in your life? And it brings me back to the original question. What road are you on? What is your priority? Is your priority things of this earth that will pass away? Buildings, vehicles, money, prestige, glory, pomp, and circumstance. Even those that we love. Or is your priority God? The eternal one, the one that does not go away, we all become eternal with Him. See, the great thing about God is He doesn't say, I only have room for 3. You ever go to a hotel and there's been several times? We are not a very good planning family when we go on vacation. Like Denise will plan the eventuality of where we end up. But getting from here to there, we'll drive as long as we want to, or if things are, the roads are bad, you never know, you may get stuck in some town or something. We were coming home from West Virginia. Google took us the wrong way. We had 3 Googles going on Google, Alexa, and some compound or something. They took us all completely different directions. The next thing I know, we went from West Virginia, here we're going home, we should have went this way, we went up to Washington, D.C. About 6 hours out of the way, but the roads were so bad, you literally couldn't get over. So, what road are you on? Are you on the direct link to you and heaven and God, or are you on the Washington, D.C. track? Because you need a little bit more wilderness time. God is asking, Jesus is asking these questions to the apostles to make them think. Have you tried the other side? Yeah, we tried the other side. We were fishermen. We've been fishing our whole life. We tried the front, the back, left, the right. We even tried diagonally. Come on, there's no fish in this lake right here, right now. Why? Because God, Jesus, will often move us along wrong. Jesus said, bring some of the fish which you have caught. Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land, full of large fish, 153. Now, if you can picture, which I can't, but they say that the fish were, a good 2 feet long. These were not like the little bass that we get around here, even if you're lucky to get a 3 or 4 pound bass. These are massive sea fish. So if you've ever been, watching those people, they go out into the oceans and stuff like that, saltwater fish, like the cod and the tuna, things that they're like 15, 20 pounds. So picture 6 guys pulling in a net that was probably somewhere between 50 and 100 feet long with 153 fish that were each about, let's just say 10 pounds. That's a lot of weight for these guys to do what? They didn't have the old mechanical cranks or anything like that. They literally were pulling them in. And normally, what would happen to the nets, because again, these weren't fabricated nets necessarily from a factory like we know. These nets were ones that they made out of reeds and out of papyrus and things that they strung together. These nets were not very good. They were as good as they were back then, but for us now, we look at those and go, oh, those are so archaic. It didn't work. It didn't work. So, when we trust in God, our lives will not rip apart. See, there's other things in the story that we just read the story and go, oh yeah, they brought in all these fish, that's great, and they ate, and they were happy. Do you not see that? I guess I pictured this net of my life. And sometimes I think that net is so full of garbage and sin, water bottles, if you will, for the bucket, that I try to pull them in and I struggle and I can't pull them in. And the net, my life, begins to rip apart. But when we trust in Jesus, when we give Him our lives, our nets will be sometimes lighter, but they will not rip apart. He will hold us together. He will help us bring it in and get rid of the things we need to. The bounty of fish was massive. They didn't know what to do with all the fish at that point. They literally had nothing after all night long, and now they have 150 fish. When we listen to Jesus, our lives will be rock solid, the net, and will be full of abundance. So my question to you goes back to what road are you on? Are you giving God everything, or are you the young teenager going, I got this? Bring it. There ain't nothing I can't handle. Because I guarantee the evil one is out there going, oh yeah, watch this, I'll break your back and heart. I will bring you down. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples
ventured to question, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus came and he took the bread and he gave it to them, and the fish likewise. And this is now the third time that Jesus was manifest to the disciples after he raised them from the dead. So they had finished breakfast with Jesus, and he said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of God, do you love me more than these?" He says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said, "Tend my lambs." He said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Shepherd my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of God, son of John, do you love me?" Peter grieved because he had said this the third time, "Do you love me?" And he answered them, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Now we may look at that and go, boy, he was really kind of beaten up on the animals. We remember just before Jesus died, what happened? I'm sorry, Peter. What happened? He denied him 3 times. Right? The rooster crowed. He needed Peter to step up. He needed him to understand, listen, when I first met you and I said your name will be the Rock, I meant it. Your name will now be Cephas, Peter, the Rock. It's no longer just Simon. And when I call you Simon, that means you did something foolish. But when I call you the Rock, that means you're walking in my way. Peter, I know what you did. I know that you were afraid and you were scared. You didn't know what was going on because I was going away. I was being tortured. I was being crucified. And you were afraid. Now I need to understand that I arose from the dead. Jesus said it. That he arose from the dead, and now he is back to be with Peter. Peter now understands he will become the rock of the church. He will be the first one to give a sermon on Pentecost. He is the one that will lead the apostles when they don't know what to do to go out and begin their ministry. Peter will be the strongest one of the apostles. And he needed him to understand it. Jesus knew his heart. Jesus knows your heart right now. But if you were standing here and you looked at each and every one of you and he says, "Do you love me?" what would you say? Knowing that he knows everything you said yesterday. He knows everything that you did yesterday and the day before that. Knowing your tone of voice, your attitude, how you treated people. Do you love me? Because if you love me, then why did you do all of this to those people? Why did you act better than them? Why did you act like you're more special than anyone else? Aren't we supposed to be the biggest servant of all? He who is first will be last, and he who is last shall be first in the kingdom of God. Jesus knows those things, so he's asking you guys right now, do you love me? And if you do, get off your butts and tend my sheep. Shepherd my lambs. Now, who are those? Well, it's each other here, and it's everyone out there. He's saying, it's time to do your work. It's time to do your job. It's time to be the church that he needs us to be. And we see also that many times in the past, Jesus asked those same questions. You know, we see people that responded differently. Think about Luke 14, the wise young ruler, rich ruler, right? Comes to Jesus, man, what do I need to do to be saved? Jesus says, follow the Old Testament, follow the law of Moses. And he goes, I do all that. He goes, okay, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then you'll be ready to come to me. And he walked away crying in terror because he knew that in his heart he could not give up his money. He could not give up the things of this earth to serve a God, a heavenly God, because his God is here. The rich young ruler could do it. We also see the story in Acts 5. Ananias and Sapphira got together to conspire to plot the chief church to get ahead. And then what happened? They both dropped dead. Why? Because they lied to the Holy Spirit. They didn't have to give everything. That was not a prerequisite. It wasn't like, go sell your house, give everything to the church. But that's what people were doing. So they wanted to look cool and be like everybody else. So they sold everything. And then they said, yeah, What do you say? Let's keep going with that cash off the side. You never know. We might go to Disney this year or something. And when they went before the apostles, they were like, is this all? Oh, absolutely, we have a single penny. And they lied to the Holy Spirit, and they both got that. Why? Because they still wanted to hold on to the world. They still wanted to hold on to right here, right now. This is what I see. This is what I want. Where God says, give it all away. This is not what you need. This is the devil here. I live there, and this is where I want you. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you to where you do not wish to go. He's still again talking to Peter at this time, and he is telling him that you will be crucified. You will be girded by someone else, and you're not going to want to go there. I remember as a fireman, especially as a new fireman, I was always excited to start the day. It was the best time of the day. I always got there like half an hour early. Why? Because all the old guys were sitting around. We get up, we got woke up if we weren't already up on call. We get woke up at 45 minutes or half an hour before, and then we would leave. So the guys were already up doing daily chores, emptying the garden, all that stuff. But then everybody sits down and sit around the coffee table. I learned more about fire service, what to do and what not to do at the coffee table. And trust me, I got a file full of certifications to say I was a really smart guy, and I'm really not. The things I learned were guys that did it. And they were sitting there, and they talked to me, and they showed me. The other apostles are listening to this, and they're going, ooh, it's tasted meat. I don't know why, but Jesus is telling me, trust me, I've been there. I know you're not going to want to go there. So what does Peter do? He goes right back into the world, right? Now, this, he said, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved, John. And he said to him, the one who has leaned back on his bosom at the supper and said, Lord, who is the one that betrays you? So Peter, seeing him, said, well, what about him? Well, what's going to happen to that guy? I mean, I like John. He's a pretty decent guy. I guess, gotta be John. But what about him? What does Jesus say? Jesus said to him, if I want you to remain until I come, what is that to you? Now follow me. That's the second time now Jesus, in a very short conversation, has said, follow me. Why? Because we become distracted. We saw at the very beginning of this chapter what? Jesus is encouraging them to cast out on the other side. Stay with me. Let me be your net, and I will bring you in. I will keep you together. He then moves into to Peter. Do you love me? Stay in me, and I will keep you together. Peter now asks him, okay, I get it, I'm going to die, but what about that guy? Stay with me, and I will keep you together. The whole meaning of this last chapter of John is John, the one who Jesus loved, is trying to explain to the rest of us for all of eternity that if we just keep our eyes on God, if we keep our eyes on Jesus, if we keep the Holy Spirit flourishing in our heart and mind, we will not have a breezy life. We're not going to have everything we want, but we will have the end goal of being with God for eternity. There's nothing that Satan can do to us here. You can say, well, Satan tempts me all the time. He tempts you. Do you allow the temptation to go through? Or do you get on your knees and say, God, I'm doing it again. Jesus, I need your help. Holy Spirit, give me your power to say no or to say yes to whatever it is. And if you're only doing that the times you're tempted, again, you get it wrong. How often do you spend time with God? Where's your priority? Is your priority God all the time, sun up to sundown,
get you tomorrow.
We need to remember what our priorities are. We need to remember what our priorities should be. And then we can remember all that will be accomplished. Therefore, this saying went out among the brethren, that the disciple who would not die. Yet Jesus did not say that he would not die, but only if I want him to remain until I come. What is that to you? We know that John was the only apostle that was not martyred. He did die in his old age, after writing the book of Revelation, but he was the only one that was not martyred. I love how John finishes this book. This is the disciple who is testifying to these things and wrote these things, and we know that this testimony is true. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, which if they were written in detail, I suppose that even the world itself would not contain the books that they were written in. You know, it's interesting when I've had people ask me when we look at the Bible, and they say, well, that's all that Jesus did. He had 3 years. He only did like 20 things in 3 years. And I try to explain to them, you know, back then, they didn't have laptops. They didn't have cell phones. Not everybody was able to click a picture out of the Jesus book. And so many of the stories that they have are not there. And John's testimony is right there. Robert Louis Steven grew up in a small town in Scotland in the 20th century. And he remembers the man lighting the gas lamps at night. There's a man who is punching holes in the darkness. I love that imagery. When we are in the light of Christ, when we are fishers of men, when we say, yes, Jesus, I love you, and he says to us, tend my sheep, and lead my sheep, and shepherd my flock, we are punching holes in the darkness. Darkness cannot delete darkness, only light. So where's your light? How bright your light shining right now? Are you caught up in the wrong road of the world? Or are you in the light of Christ? And if you are in the darkness, I encourage you today to change the darkness into light. Rick Warren said, those who tend to follow the crowd often get lost in it. Where are you at in the crowd? Are you standing in a crowded mall right now? Not really looking at the worldly stuff? Or are you the one standing on the inside with the Bible in your hand going, I have something better. I have something to do. What's your priority? Where are your priorities? And what are you standing on? Here's Father, we praise you for this. Just kind of long chapter. But Father, we thank you for the lessons that are in it. So many lessons. So many, just even seeing Jesus reconciling Peter back to where he needed to be. Father, that's what was accomplished on the cross, truly, is you reconciling us back to you. Us coming back into the light from the darkness. Us becoming truly fishers of men. Us needing to be more worried about you and what you think than anyone else that we know. Father, we pray. I pray for this church right now. I pray everyone here, everyone that will watch this video. I pray, Father, that they would begin to see you as their first